Welcome to the summer edition of the Sprint to Success with Design Thinking podcast.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skill set to be successful? Welcome, everyone, to the Sprint to Success with Design Thinking podcast. I'm your host, Saba Kidwai. Join me each week as I share the stories and strategies from the world's leading researchers and practitioners about why they believe the answer lies in practicing design thinking.
Having design thinking skills is incredibly valuable, or taking the perspective of a designer is incredibly valuable for almost any challenge, whether it's personal, societal, organizational. I think the real benefit is having, initially starting with empathy, just really understanding the challenges that people may be facing that are not you, understanding their perspectives and understanding their unmet needs. I think often we substitute our experience and our realities for others, right? So being able to connect with people, to speak with them, to understand their goals, their objectives, their ambitions in any aspect of life, or whether they're in business or whether they're, dealing with socioeconomic disadvantage, for example, is incredibly important. So I think starting with empathy is very, very important. Then I think the other element of it that we can pull from design thinking is just the idea of defining both the challenge that we are trying to address. There's this saying, that a problem well stated is half solved. Or maybe that's not the saying, but something along those lines, right? Yeah. So, just being able to define exactly what you're trying to solve for. I think we see this challenge right now, especially in a time as volatile as this, where there are big societal changes that are happening. A big part of the protest is people are saying, we want equality, but what does that mean? What does that translate to, right? I think that is the important part of it that's just getting defined as people start thinking in more specific terms about what are the areas that we are going to address as a priority, whether it's something like the discussion around defunding the police, whether it's thinking about how you bring people who have traditionally been underrepresented into organizations, thinking about, AI and facial recognition and sentience and all of these challenges that may need to be addressed. So I think being able to define the challenge that you really want to work on is a really incredible skill. And when having discussions, whether it's in your family or elsewhere, just being able to state the problem and the challenge so it doesn't get overly emotional, I think is actually really critical. Often I find, like, when I'm having conversations, it's people are going in 15 different directions and they're sharing 15 different ideas. And part of the benefit of design thinking is just this ability to focus on a single challenge at a time. And then you can get really generative and coming up with ideas and solutions. But it's really hard to create effective solutions if you're trying to solve for 50 different problems or having 50 different discussions, in my experience.
Yeah, I think, designers are supposed to be unbiased, right? Because every experience is different. So to Kandis's point, the empathy is super important. You don't necessarily agree with what the person is going through, but understanding why they see things a certain way and understanding what the problem is you're trying to solve and being able to help that person change their behavior. And sometimes you're not changing their behavior as a designer. Sometimes you're taking their behavior and actually accentuating it or helping them, actually get their point across or what they're trying to do, right? So I think that's really important. We always say we are not designers, right? We are management consultants by trade, but I think the design process should be a part of what everyone does. Because if you don't get to the root of the problem, whether you're in business process management, whether you're in Six Sigma, then you're actually not solving the problem. And that's design, right? They really get to the root of things. But again, when I started in business process management and Six Sigma, it was all about what was the process step? How much time did it take? How do you automate it? Right? It was never about who are you trying to solve for? How are they feeling? What is their need? What is their motivation? What are their pains? What is the value proposition or the opportunity? And that's where it come along in 10 years. And design thinking existed before that, but it was in a design silo. And once it was introduced to me as a business person, I was like, this is amazing because, if you solve a problem just about the process step or how long it takes, and you've reduced that from 2 weeks to a couple minutes through technology, that's great. But the game changer opportunities always come from understanding the person, understanding how they're feeling, understanding their needs and motivations. That's where companies like Uber and Lyft and Amazon and Apple have really made the difference.
I think it really depends on the organization, and it depends on who you're working with. There's some people, I think a lot of people are trying to get their brains around, what is the future going to look like? What does this low touch economy potentially look like? And what are the implications for my business? I think what COVID has done is really accelerated a lot of trends that had already started. It's not so much a disruption as an accelerator. So things around remote work, for example, ideas around automation. I think everyone is exploring that. So I think there is some. I think most of the people that we're engaging with, there is some introspection. I think the challenge right now, though, is that there are so many immediate things that people need to do that are new. So just the idea that I now have to figure out how to have, for many organizations, 80% of my workforce remote, but still keep us productive, still keep us engaged. Everyone is trying to navigate that. So everyone is changing their systems, and that has to happen very rapidly because they want to maintain productivity, right? So I understand that people are really challenged with what's new. I do think that people are trying to be introspective about it, but at the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear. And I think the biggest challenge is nobody knows how long. So sometimes people are making decisions that that are going to address like the next 3 months, for example. But being able to step back and think about what the next 3 years are going to look like becomes more challenging. I do think that people want to do that. I think the challenge is, the exigencies of the now may prevent them from doing so. When we're talking to organizations, especially that are like, we just need to react. We talk about, like what are the benefits of that versus the benefits of taking this moment, taking this pause, and really considering, as we talked about, action without vision can be a nightmare. So how do you step back and think about the broader vision for what you want to achieve for your organization? So there are some of those discussions that are happening, but I do think that there is a sense from everyone right now that the future is very uncertain. Let's build in the time to start having more meaningful discussions about where we want to go as organizations during this time.
The conversation was around what are the open questions that you still need to answer? What are the risks that we need to be aware of? And what are the assumptions that we're making as we're defining this vision and strategy moving forward. And the things that he was saying was, all the risks that we have today with COVID are also all the advantages that we have with COVID, right? People are working from home. People are moving off mobile. We're seeing people move off mobile to their desktop or their iPad, right? Which is a change. We are seeing people being able to sit down and focus more on content, right? Versus move, but we still need to help them move faster. The other risks are, what's going to happen when we come out of COVID? Are we going to have stickiness based on the direction and vision that we have? We're potentially going into an economic depression, and we have an election coming and his personal opinion was, no matter which direction we go, we're screwed. So that was really interesting, right? Because he was looking at this new product that they're bringing to market this year. Those were all the risks that he was thinking about. At a day-to-day office level, what we're hearing from clients is that there is no more 9 to 5, right? Parents, children, and they're taking care, one parent is taking the morning shift until noon and the other parent is taking 12 to 5. And so people are working shifted hours. So no longer 9 to 5, they might work like 7 to 12 or 1 to 10 p.m. as an example. And before, everyone had to come into the office, and now no one can come into the office, and people are okay with that, right? Because the organization was old school, where they didn't have trust and confidence in their employees, and now they're seeing their employees do a lot better from a majority standpoint. There are still people who are not doing well because they don't have internet access at home or reliable internet access. We spoke to a teacher last week for one of our user research interviews, and she was telling me that, one, in New York, they were not prepared to transition to digital. And yes, they have Zoom calls with the children, but a portion of her kids have no internet access, have no computers, so they needed to get them the technology for them to even access the content. And she was recording everything because you can't assume that people can join live. And there's some kids that have completely disappeared off the map, right? Because they don't have the family, the support, they don't have the technology, they don't have the infrastructure. So those are the 3 variations that we've seen in the last couple months of how people are adjusting to all of this.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you still have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Sprint to Success with Design Thinking community.